Hi everyone, I'm Shaylin here with Reedsy. Today's video is on how to create a world-building Bible. We've done a few videos in the past on world building, but never talked about how to make the world building Bible, which is a really helpful and important tool for a lot of sci-fi fantasy writers who use world building Bibles to create and keep track of their very expansive worlds. So what is a world building Bible? It's a document that keeps track of all of your world building notes and details in a way that's organized and easy to reference. It includes information about your world's geography, magic, cultures, history, and a bunch of other things. Some writers even include their book's outline and character profiles within their world building Bible. By having all your world building notes organized in a central location, it makes them easy to access throughout the writing process, so you can keep information consistent and always know where to find information when you need it. So as a result, a world building Bible will be most useful for sci-fi or fantasy writers who are doing heavy world building, though I suppose you could create a world building Bible in any genre if it's something that you felt would benefit you. However, most of the time it's something used by those who are writing in creative worlds where they have to construct all the details of the world themselves. That's obviously a huge task. It involves a lot of information, and that's why a world building Bible is so helpful. So the first step is to pick your software. There are a lot of different software that you can use to create a world building Bible, and you want to find the method that's going to be easiest for you. You can of course make a world building Bible in your regular word processor, but there are also a lot of alternatives that might be better suited to the task. For example, a lot of writers use Scrivener to keep track of all of their world building notes. You could also use a note-taking or organizational program like Notion, or you could use something like World Anvil, which is a program specifically designed for world building. There is no best option. The key is that it's as easy for you to build and reference as possible. Some people might really like the complexity of something like World Anvil and feel that their world is complex enough that they need a program with that much power behind it. But others might find it too cumbersome. Some people might just like the simplicity of their regular old word processor, while others might find that it just doesn't have the features needed to create something this complex. You may also start in just a regular word processor for the initial stages while you're initially taking notes, and then migrate your world building Bible over to something a little more intricate once you get down to the finer details. So what information should go into your world building Bible? This is the part of the video where I'm just gonna have to run through a ton of different aspects of the world, and to be honest, it's probably not even fully exhaustive. World building is such an intricate task, so if you feel like you miss any of this, we do have a world building template that I will leave a link to that has a checklist of a ton of different world building topics that you might like to consider. So let's run through some of the different things that might go into a world building Bible, and the sheer length of this list just goes to show why having a really organized way of keeping track of your world building notes is so important, because it really is quite a lot. So let's start out with the geography. First of all, you just want to think about the continents and the general land masses, as well as the geopolitical divisions. What are the realms, kingdoms, or countries? Or further divisions within countries like states or provinces? What about notable cities? Or even notable towns? What are all the places called, and how did they get their names? Also think about the geography. Are there mountains? Are there rivers? Are there lakes? Are there forests? Are there fields? Are there marshes? Are there bogs? Does your world have any kind of unique geographical features not found on Earth? What is the climate and weather like? What about the flora and fauna? I would definitely recommend making a map. Personally, I like Incarnate for making maps for fantasy. It's really easy to use, and it's also free, and it'll definitely serve you well to have a map that you can reference. Now, what about your world's history? What are the major historical events that have impacted your world? Making a timeline here would be especially useful. What about different dynasties and reigns? Does your world have different eras that are divided based on really important cornerstone events? The main question when thinking about your book's history is, where is the world right now, and what has happened to get us to this point? What about the geopolitics? You might think about things like commerce and trade between realms. What are the international relations like? Are there any conflicts, wars? Is there any kind of colonialism? After you've laid out the general geography of your world, thinking about the geopolitical situation is really important, because it probably has a huge effect on your story, especially if your book has any kind of political intrigue. Now, what about religion, mythology, and beliefs? What are the religions in your world? Are there any folktales, myths, or legends legends? What are the gods and deities that people believe in? Going into your world's culture, there's so many things to consider, but you can start by thinking about these points. What languages do people speak? What kind of entertainment do people go to? You know, are there plays? Are there books? What kind of art is there? Maybe you have a futuristic world and there's some kind of really cool holographic interactive movies. What kind of clothing do people wear? What kind of food do people eat? What are the holidays? What are the social customs? What are the cultural values? How are people educated? What are the social taboos? You also probably want to think about your world's technology. You may be basing it off of a historical time period where you can reference the level of technology that existed. How is this impacted by any kind of magic? What kind of medicine exists? Another really important aspect of your world to think of is the societal and power structures. What are the social classes? What are the oppressed or privileged groups? What is the government type and structure? What are common professions? What about laws? How are these laws enforced? What is the military like? You can also think about more interpersonal details on the relationship level. What are family structures like? What about relationships? Are there any kind of dating or marriage customs? And finally, of course, you can think about magic if that's something that exists in your world. If you're writing sci-fi, you may want to replace this more with the technology aspects, but for fantasy, you may be dealing more with magical elements. Or maybe your book has a blend of both. What are the magic systems? Are there any magical creatures? Are there any magical items? Any historical important magical events? Are there any important magical locations? Now, if that seems like a lot, keep in mind that if you have multiple different realms and different cultures and different countries within your world, you may have to think about all these things and more for multiple different places. So it's a lot of information. That's why having a world building Bible is so important. But keep this in mind. All of this information intersects. The flora and fauna will affect the food that people eat. The climate and weather will affect the clothes that people wear and what the architecture looks like. If magic exists, it could have an effect on anything and everything, from medicine to education to laws. So how do you get started? The best way to get started with world building is to start with the information that directly impacts your story. So if you're writing a book that deals with court politics and magic, you probably want to start by thinking about your magic systems, the government structure, and the world's geopolitical situation. Then, after you develop those things, you can start working on aspects of the world that are directly connected to those aspects, right? So thinking about the current geopolitical situation will probably require you to think about the world's history. As you develop your magic system, you might ask questions like, okay, but how are people with magic educated? As you think about the educational system, this might lead you to think about common jobs and professions that people do in this world and how they're educated for those jobs. As you work through the book this way, connection by connection, you'll find that some things have a very direct and deep impact on the plot, and other things are more background details, set dressing, you know? They might be mentioned, but you could change them and it wouldn't really have a direct impact on the plot. You can also use your characters as starting points. As you develop your characters, you'll have to figure out how they're situated in the world, which you can use as a beginning point to develop all the aspects of your world that directly impact them. Whether that's their job, their family, their backstory, character can also be a great window into world building. The key with world building is to remember that everything is connected. That's why a program like World Anvil can be really helpful, because it literally interlinks everything like a wiki. But no matter how you format your world building Bible, one of the keys, if not the key to strong world building, is thinking about how every detail in your world impacts and is impacted by the other aspects of the world. No aspect of your world is just going to evolve in a bubble. It's all interconnected. You can also supplement your world building with research. If you're stuck, research is your friend. The more similar your setting is to a real Earth, time, or place, the more research you'll likely have to do. And the more your world is just a completely invented world, not based on any real time or place, the more you can probably just make things up. But even if you're writing in a completely invented world, research can be really helpful if you're stuck. And it's especially helpful for the areas of world building that you may not be as confident or educated on. Everyone is going to have different aspects of world building that they really like and are really good at, and others that maybe aren't as natural for them. So in world building, I really love magic systems, cultural customs, religions, and geography. Those things interest me in real life, so I'm good at developing them in a fantasy world. But things I'm not great at are things like developing the economy, commerce, and anything to do with wars or the military. I don't find these things very interesting or know much about them in real life, so it's very hard for me to think about how the military would work when I don't really know how militaries work. Because I don't really know anything about how ancient warfare or ancient economies would work, it's hard to invent my own version of these things because I don't really have any starting basis. That's why it can be really helpful to do research on the areas of the world that you're less confident in and don't come as naturally to you, you can still adjust and tweak them a lot and just use that research as inspiration. But having that background knowledge will be really helpful if it's a topic that's not as natural for you. But along with that, one of the best tips for world building is to just find what you're good at and really dive into that. If there's one aspect of world building you love, focus on that. Use that as your starting point and deeply intertwine the plot with that aspect of the world. Not every single detail in your world needs to be wildly original. In fact, that's probably impossible. In most books, you don't have the time to explore all that stuff anyways. But if you can identify a few aspects of the world that are really well conceptualized, really interesting, and really compelling, you can use those things as the backbone for the story to make a really compelling plot. Because all aspects of your world are connected, by developing one aspect of your world in a really detailed, complex, original way, it will naturally give you ideas for a ton of other aspects of your world and make those really original as well. So if there's one thing that you really like, that you're really drawn to, focus on that and it will by nature develop everything around it too. So that is how to create a world building Bible. I have two questions for today. First of all, if you are a detailed world builder, what program or software do you use for world building or making your world building Bible? My second question is just what is your favorite aspect of world building? So thank you so much for watching. I'll leave some related videos linked in the description. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos from us. We've got new writing, editing, and publishing tips every Tuesday and Friday. Until next time, bye!